Hello all, Dan Brown at danbrowncgi.com, aka jdaniels at blenderartist.org. Uh, this is a video tutorial that is an answer to a request. Somebody asked me how I do the lines in the on the hull plating and stuff on buildings and spaceships. There is a tutorial I did about 2 years ago that it has an older method of doing it. Unfortunately, Blender has changed and has been updated in the past 2 years since that was made. The method is still viable. You can still use the old tutorial. This new tutorial, though, updates and has a few new settings and uses a few new tools that Blender has been refined, in other words. Both ways of doing things are equally viable still. If you want to use the old method, that's great. In fact, the old method may work in some circumstances where this new method does not work. And this new method may not work in all cases either. So you may, even on the same model, may use both methods. This method uses basically the same techniques as the old method, but it's a little refined. You'll see. Anyway, I'm going to include the link to the old tutorial in the comment section underneath this video, so you get an idea of what's going on. Anyway, so basically the result of what you're looking at is this. You have these lines, is what people were asking. How do I do these diagonal and lines and extrusions and stuff? This tutorial shows you how. It's pretty simple how it's done, how the greebles are done and stuff. What we're going to focus on is not how I did these kind of greebles. That's pretty straightforward. You can do those. It's just shapes, basic geometry. But this here, I'm going to show you how I do these and how I do these. It's actually pretty simple. Incidentally, if you want to know how to do these treads, check out the tutorial done by Greg Zoll. I think is how you pronounce his name. Terrible. Anyway, so just to let you know. Okay, so let's start. I'm going to start in a new setting, a new scene. Go to front view, and what we're going to do is we're just going to do a bulkhead for a spaceship. Real simple. So you start with simple geometry. This is simple modeling. So we have a corridor scene here we're going to make. Simple. Corridors are about 3 meters tall. I do metric. You may like imperial if you want. That's up to you. I prefer metric simply because it satisfies my OCD with mathematical precision and whatnot. So you start like this, and we'll just extrude and make some weird shapes. General shape, you know, nothing special. Yeah. You know, typical kind of spaceship-y kind of thing. That goes in a meter. It's a little too excessive. Yeah, that's good. And we'll do that and that and that. So that's our corridor. It's very simple. I probably would refine it more, but for the sake of whatever, we'll probably actually add a little baseboard here. There we go. Awesome. Okay, we'll move you down here. The useless thing. And what we're going to do is we're going to add modifiers. So you go into the modifier panel in Blender, and then you add a modifier. What we're going to start with is a mirror modifier. It's modified on the x-axis, so we have the two walls, and they meet in the middle in the ceiling. Then we add a bevel modifier. Now it's at 10 centimeters. I like to set it to 1 centimeter. That's pretty good. So this is what we have now. We have a wall segment. And the beauty of doing it in segmentation is that what happens is you can take this and set an array modifier and just repeat it. And what happens is any changes that you make to the original mesh will be repeated over, and so it's great that way. It reduces a lot of duplication of effort. It makes the machine do it instead of you, and it's instant and it's great. So I recommend doing these things in segment form. For one thing, it makes it a lot easier to duplicate, and also it becomes very modular. And that's great when you're building interiors of sets. Instead of building each piece of geometry separate, which would take forever, you simply take and duplicate chunks of stuff. You have a corridor T section, you have a corridor section, you have a corridor with doors, you have a corridor. Each section is specific, and you just drag and drop them in, and you separate it using bulkheads, or you separate it using like pillars or support struts or stuff like that, and it makes it very technical and very cool. Okay, so just a little heads up on how you do that. Okay, so now we have our base geometry. This is our base. This is what we're going to use to set everything else on top of it. Okay, now push Shift D to duplicate. And now you have two of the same. Add an additional modifier. You go in and add solidify. And then place it above the bevel modifier. Now what happens is the solidify makes it so that it depends on which direction your normals are facing. In this case, the normals are likely, let's turn on backface culling and see what we got here. Okay, so the geometry is facing outward. The normals are facing outward. We don't want that because we're not going to be outside the mesh. We're going to be inside it for the interior. So you select all, then W, flip normals. Now it's the interior. Do the same thing for the solidified section. This will make up your paneling. Now notice that it goes outward. We want it inward. There we go. Never mind. I thought he was supposed to be professional at this. Well, anyway, so we have this now. Now what we're going to do is we're going to make edge loops. Control R makes a ring to be cut down here. So you select, and you just basically, what you're doing is making lines in the mesh. Just random kind of lines where your artistic sense will allow you to do it. And you take out the faces. You go to face select mode, right click the face that you want to delete, and select that. And now you have lines. It's that simple. And you just do this repeatedly until you get what you want. Sometimes if you want lines that are symmetrical, do a middle line. That way everything is correct. Another tip is when you're doing loop select, if you push E, it will do even. You can push F for flipped. Notice the red dot. That red dot is what it's going after. Now this is kind of silly, it doesn't do much. However, let's try something. If we were to move this axis on the y-axis, if we move this line on the y-axis, let's say 40 centimeters that way. Now what happens is, notice the loop cut evens out. It does the median between the two. Now that's useful sometimes, but notice we're going to have an asymmetrical line here. We don't want that. Push E, and notice now it is parallel to the this selection, or if we push F, it's parallel to the flat selection. It's very useful in this. You'll see when you start doing this, that can be very useful when you have diagonal lines. But for now, we're not going to do diagonal lines quite yet. I'll show you how in a minute, how that can be useful. Anyway, so we're going to make 2 lines here. Do it by eye. We should be doing this by numbers, but oh well. And then we take this, and we get rid of that. Now, to add diagonal lines, make sure snap is on. You want to click on the little magnet button. Make sure snap is on. Push G, and then move along the axis that you want. Let's see, we'll do about 30 centimeters. Looks good. Yeah, and then we'll do it again here. That's not even. Why isn't it even? I'll do it by eye again. My edge loop was off. Still not even. Yeah, that's a little better. And there you go. Now, if we render it, we should get a nice little thing. Now the question that may arise with some is, why do I use a bevel modifier? Beveling is awesome. Please use it. Here is why. We turn off the bevel modifier and watch what happens. You can't really see it probably in the video, but try it. And what you'll notice is, though the ambient occlusion picks it up, if I put any lighting in this scene, it won't pick up the edges very well. It also looks artificial and fake, because there is no truly 100% 90-degree angle in real life. Even sharp objects like diamond cutting is not 100% 90 degrees, or point. It's not a point. There's always a slight beveling or chamfering in the model. This allows you to catch light. Notice this corner catches the light now in a way that it didn't before. But when you do this, it highlights the lines, the geometry, and your shape comes through better. It looks better. So I highly recommend using the bevel modifier. Other people prefer using the W bevel or Control B. I don't do that because, I mean, it's up to each individual. I use the bevel modifier simply because I can change it over time if I want it, or move the modifier around. If I simply beveled now using the actual geometry, Control B, it wouldn't work as well for me. Anyway, so we'll continue to add details until we get what we really like. Sometimes, it's good to take whole chunks out. Other times, it's not. What we're going to do now is add a light. So you select and then push P to separate by selection. And now we have a panel line here. And what we'll do is we'll add a new and new. We'll make a new, and we'll say this is light. And we'll get to the emission and 2. We also want to color it differently so that we know exactly what this is. Whoops, I did that wrong. There we go. Alright, now what's going to happen is, we'll see. Now we have lights. This would show up better if, let's turn down the ambient light a little. There. Now you have some lights. This is an easy and cheap way to do it. I don't prefer it this way, though if I'm in a crunch and I have no time, this is how I'd do it. A better way to do it is to delete that altogether and put a hole there in the original mesh as well, which isn't too difficult to do, seeing as we're using snap. We now have a face. extrude outward, delete the back face, and now we have a hole. Now you could put a light geometry in here and make a special light. I have a selection that I use and that I made previously that I based off some game art that I found, and I just drop them in wherever, liberally spraying them around, and it looks great. So that's what I do. Now you continue to add geometry. I don't know why I use that word so much. I like it a lot. And that's basically it. It's not rocket. Well, it's not really hard to do. It's just slightly tedious, and you gotta work at it until you get what you want. Yeah, that's pretty good. We'll do the ceiling too. There are multiple methods you can use. For instance, you can select a whole group of this and then separate it out, and what happens is you rejoin it, and now you have lines, which you can then use. Well, there are different methods. Experiment. Don't be afraid to try different things. You might be pleasantly surprised. Why isn't that working? Why do you do that and that, but... I don't get it. Why does it go there? Alright, well, we'll cheat. Force it. How about that? There. Take that. Then we'll rejoin. There. And so, this is basically all this is doing, essentially, is adding visual interest to the surfaces. Because a flat, bland surface is boring, whereas lots of lines and stuff just gives a general dynamic. Word of caution, don't overdo it. You could actually, Herman Zimmerman put it the best. This is the guy who helped design Star Trek, the sets for Star Trek. He made a good point once. He said, you can overdo it, and to the point where your backgrounds and your sets and all this awesome stuff that you're building can actually detract from the story that you're trying to tell, because people could be so in awe of the background visuals, and there have been sadly movies that have done this, where the set design, the costuming, all the special effects actually detracted from the story because everybody was so, look at the awesome cityscape. So you can actually design yourself out of the movie business. So if you're going to make art, make sure that your story and the character comes through more than the stuff. But if this is just, I mean, you can go all hog wild if you wanted to. It's up to you. So that's pretty good. Yeah. And up here, we'll add a couple more lines, and then we're pretty much going to be done with that. So I hope you get the idea of what this is. It's usually just a balance between horizontal and vertical lines. That's pretty much it. You want to add visual interest to your scene. Whoopsie. Let's turn this back up because we're lacking our light. Yeah, that's pretty good. Yeah. Now, in a few minutes, what we're going to do, I'm going to show you how to get rid of the back faces when you apply these modifiers, because you're not going to want this kind of geometry in the back is just wasted geometry. You're going to have a lot of extra faces in the scene, especially if it's a complex scene. So I'll show you how to get rid of that in a few minutes. Actually, I'll show you now. Notice here in the solidify modifier, you have two things here. You have the material index offset, it's called. This is, if it's 0, it is the same. The back faces, the ones that are generated and aren't real, are the same material index as this one. A material index, if you don't know, is these things. This is a material index, this is a material index, this is a material index. We're going to use that to get rid of the back faces when we apply the solidify modifier. Select it to go to 2. I usually do 2, simply because it gets it away from 0 as far as possible, so I don't accidentally delete anything else. So a good safety thing is duplicate the mesh, and then move the duplicated mesh to my storage layer, which is usually the last one on the top layer. Here is where I keep my storage stuff. Reselect the old layer, make sure it's at 2, apply the mirror modifier, apply the solidify modifier, leave the bevel modifier. That's important. Do not get rid of the bevel modifier because you will regret it. It's hard to explain, just leave it. Okay, so now what we have is our finished geometry. So select. Uh-oh. Generated faces are on this side. Okay. We don't want that. See? This is why we flip the normals. Go offset 1. Now look. Ta-da! Isn't that great? We want to actually do 0 because I want to extrude this a little more. 5 centimeters is better. Yeah, that gives us a good chunk of geometry. And we want to turn the bevel down slightly to 0.5 centimeters. Yeah, that's a little better. Let's turn this down to 3 centimeters. Make it slightly less extruded. Yeah, that might be good. No, it's still too much. I don't like it. I want it to be more subtle. Yeah, that's better. Okay. A bit of art direction here. Depending on what you want your spaceship to be. If it's an evil place, try more extrusion, 5 centimeters, and turn down the bevel as low as possible to make the lines as sharp and menacing. Make it look imposing, beefy, and huge and evil. On the other hand, if you wanted to make it softer and more friendly, good guy ship, reduce the solidify and increase the bevel. Everything looks softer, nicer, more comfortable, and use brighter, pretty colors. Just a little bit of hint there. Works really well. Anyway, so now we should be okay. So let's reapply. Let's get rid of this first. What we're going to do is we're going to reduplicate, move that over there, and then we're going to reapply all the modifiers. Let's see what we got now. So this is correct. We have the edges and the right faces. So we don't want that one. We select that one. There we go. Delete faces. Now you only have the front geometry. The back geometry is gone. Voila. Okay, moving on. Now we're going to add some of those awesome, I guess they're access panels. I guess. They could be whatever you want them to be. So what we're going to do is we're going to, first off, get rid of one edge. And we're going to mirror this. Okay. Now again, edge loops. Do your Control R. Very good. Delete these corners. And add faces. So now you have this kind of chamfered beveled looking thing. Okay? Now, this is your base of what you're going to use for the plate, for the access panels or sensor nodes or whatever you want them to be. You go in and you add another solidify modifier. This time we're going to make it to, let's try 3 centimeters. Yeah, that's good. And then we're going to do a bevel modifier, 1 centimeter. No, we're going to do 8 millimeters. Yeah, that's better. And now we have a pretty good. Let's move this back a little. Add a little bit more of a chamfer. Accentuate the lines a little more. It gives a little more visual interest. Okay. Now, if we just put this panel willy-nilly everywhere, it would add some interest. But there's additional layers of detail you can add. Take the original, duplicate. Oh, wait. Sorry. 1 second. We're going to apply the mirror. Yeah, okay. Now, take the original and duplicate it, and shrink it down, and just move it up. Like so. And why is it doing that? I probably have too many faces. Let's try this. Yeah, there we go. It was too much bevel, and it was starting to crease my faces. Okay. So now we have this, and what we do is we add additional layers. Then you can do this. You don't have to have the chamfered edges. Instead, you start adding like little, what will look like grills from a distance, but it's just really just this kind of geometry. That's it. And you add these little things, these little doodads here and there, and you change them around per face so that you get cool looking geometry. You just want cool looking shapes that look like they function, but they really don't. And you can even go even crazier and add a third layer of detail to these things so that it looks even cooler. And that's basically all you do. Use your imagination. I usually put them in the corners. For some reason, putting it in the middle is acceptable. You just make multiple types of stuff. Sometimes you don't have everything. You have just one thing. And it's all in what you're trying to accomplish. So now you have multiple squares. Now you take these and you apply them to your stuff by taking it up and just dragging and dropping where you want it to be. A word of caution. You're going to have intersecting lines. This does not look good. It goes against what I think it would look good. So what I do is I just pull this down until I get what I want. And so I don't want intersecting lines. Lines that intersect where you have multiple things, it kind of it jars what should be there. I can't explain it very well. I shouldn't have actually gotten rid of that. I should have left that so I had room, and I can't now. That makes me sad. Without going into detail and boring you guys to tears and redoing the entire thing. So, but in this case, I would have gone back to my original mesh and simply filled in these faces, and then reapplied the modifiers. Which, you know what? Just imagine that I did that. Ta-da! Look at that. Isn't that great? Now I can change and manipulate these things all I want until I get the designs that I like. And moving these things around so that no two look alike. so I don't get, you know, redundancy. And basically all I'm doing is just snapping, moving these things around so that I get basically the look that I want. And then we'll take these and we'll do the same thing. We'll just add where we want them to go. And the beauty of it is you can manipulate these to where you want them to be and just drag and drop and duplicate however you please. What I don't like doing, and how I personally prefer, is I do not scale these things when I'm placing them. That way, what happens is all the chamfered edges here are the same size, and it keeps things looking very machined and very I'm looking for the word, very uniform, like it came off an assembly line. This is what you want with any kind of artificial, any kind of stuff, any kind of mechanical modeling. You want it to look like it came off an assembly line, usually. Though if it's a prototype thing, you might want to make it look like it was patchwork together, but I usually don't do prototype kind of stuff that's patchwork. I usually do stuff that looks like it was it came off Ford's, Henry Ford's assembly line idea. And that's it. You can do these until the cows come home, adding as much or as little detail as you want, keeping in mind Mr. Zimmerman and his words of wisdom. You don't want to do it too much, as he said. You can over-design things. But in reality, it's up to each and every artist to make up his mind. There is no really wrong or right way to do it, as long as you're pleased with the results. And if you're if you're in a commercial sense, the customer should be ultimately pleased with the results. That's what you want. So afterward, that you get all these situated around and you like where they're at, you would of course do the same thing when you apply. You'd get rid of the back faces by, again, doing that and using the material index offset. And what happens is you get your nice, awesome geometry, your detail, your sci-fi look that you want. And that's it. So hopefully that helps you, gives you an idea how I do it. Again, this may not be the best way to do it, but it certainly is effective. So I'm going to post the link to the old tutorial up on the bottom of this. A little bit of a note. I discovered yesterday that, I know this is going to make me look really stupid, but I do that all the time anyway, so it's not going to be any different. But I discovered yesterday that YouTube has a messaging feature. I had no idea that this is the case. So I have a year's worth of messages in my inbox that I never got back to people on. I apologize if I never got back to you. I'm so sorry. I know that seems horribly unprofessional and mean. I'm sorry, it was not personal. I just didn't know I got those messages. I never even got a notification. I'm all over the internet. I have multiple places where I'm at. I have my website, I have Google+, and I have Blender Artists and YouTube. And so there's just too many places to check, and I can't keep up. And so I'm really busy. So if you need to contact me, If you want to send a message or anything, you could leave a contact on a comment on this video or any other video, and I may get around to answering, but I would just be answering comments all the time. I prefer if you contact me through my website, www.danbrowncgi.com. No dashes or anything. I'll put the link in the comment section too below in this video. And there at the bottom of the page, at the bottom of my website, there is a comment box. Type in, fill that out. It may ask for your email, I believe. I don't remember. Fill that out and send me the message that way, and I will get it in my email, which I check routinely several times a day, because that's how I keep in touch with my clients. So if you want to contact me that way, that's the best way. If you have any questions or you have a proposal, a job proposal, that's how you contact me. My email address, if you want it that way, is dan@danbrowncgi.com. I hope this tutorial helps you, and I apologize again for anybody I've missed. I honestly didn't try to be rude. I'm so sorry. This is, I hope everything's going okay for everybody, and I hope everybody's having a safe week so far, and I hope you're all doing great. All right, so this is Dan Brown, signing off.